Yeah, he wish he got the looks.
Close to it. I
All
grow the
right.
beard for my face.
I got you. All right. So we're like, man, I was growing my beard out there for a while. I think last time I was in Kentucky, I had my beard.
Yeah, you had a monstrous one, dude.
Yeah, man. And I was traveling a lot that week. I was getting ready to go out of the country, and I stopped at a barber shop in Cleveland, Tennessee, which I never go to anybody but my main guy, which is Cutshaw's Classic Barbershop over here in Manchester. And this lady just jacked me all up, man. She took like no guard and went to the whole side of my face here. And I was like, that didn't feel right. Can I take a look? And she showed it to me, and I was like, you might as well just shave the thing off.
So that's rough. Yeah, you got to have a dude. You got to have someone who understands.
Yeah. So I should have known better, but it is what it is. So I took it off, and I'm gonna let my face, kind of, how they do, like they change the crops every year.
Yeah.
A little fresh in my face. And so October, we're gonna take another stab at it.
There you go. Right. Yeah, I just shaved mine off here a week ago. My wife's hating it. She says I'm super scratchy.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, but I'm loving it. Baby face. I got to stay looking young now.
All right. So so this is your bio you just sent me. I
did. Yep. I just sent you the bio.
Cool.
Little late.
I'll read through that real quick just so everybody knows who we're talking to, and then Audrey, we'll give you a chance to. Did I pronounce your name right?
Yes, sir. Audrey.
Okay. I'll give you a chance to, and you got to cut the sir stuff out, dude. You're probably more sir than I am. We'll give you a chance to introduce yourself too, because are you guys twins?
No. My elder by 2.5 years.
Okay, I got you. Okay, cool. But I guess y'all started dental school roughly around the same time, didn't you?
Yeah, same time.
Yeah, cool, man. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, he just has his life a little bit more put together. I had to go the roundabout way and figure out how I was going to get there.
I got you. Okay, folks. Well, good morning for those that are on the Central Time Zone, and good afternoon to those that are on the Eastern Time Zone. I've got Friend Beachel with me today. He is with the Dental Student Success Organization.
Close. Yep. That'll do it. Student Dental Business Org.
Student Dental Business Org. That's in Lexington.
Yep. That's a Lexington group that we've got going.
You're also part of a national group. What was the name of that one again?
Dental Student Success Network.
Dental Student Success Network. So he's very, very plugged in to the learning community. He's a third-year dental student at the University of Kentucky in Lexington. And I made a key distinction last time I was up there, because I spoke for Patterson at U of L, and then I spoke, at U of K. And I can't remember. I think I called U of L University of Kentucky at Louisville, and they didn't very much.
They didn't like that. No. Yeah, man. Blue and red don't mix. Blue and red don't mix.
They corrected me real quick. Though not a Tennessee boy, was raised on a small hobby ranch in northern Idaho. From humble beginnings, Friend is working hard to develop a future focus. To both provide for his family, protect the future of dentistry. Post-graduation, he operated a small construction business. First year of dental school, he discovered podcasts and has consumed more podcasts and taken more notes on them than probably his entire school career combined. This earned the attention of many leaders in dentistry, including this lovely team. In dental school, he founded a business organization to help peers learn more about the business and prepare for the world to come, which is incredibly important, man. I can't even begin to stress the number of people that come out of dental school that are just underprepared to own and operate a business. And that's a pretty complex. I mean, even people that go to school to do it still do it and fail. So it's definitely a cumbersome undertaking. In his spare time, he enjoys spending time with his wife, fostering and building new relationships, playing electric violin. I saw that on your Facebook. I was going to ask about that. And local bands, and building his real estate portfolio. So he's also really involved in real estate, which is what he's doing today. He's doing some construction. Is that Mr. Jody Head?
Yes, sir.
Hey, man. How are you?
Great. How are you, John?
Very good. Were you on the call this morning?
Yes, sir.
Awesome. Cool. And then he owns multiple properties within Kentucky. He's actively under heavy construction in his fourth duplex in the last 2 years. So are you building and renting, building and selling?
Building and keeping now. So yeah, more the long-term game. So not a quick cash focus, but just, passive income focus on the next 20, 30 years out.
I got you.
So
Cool, man.
that's
Yeah, I'm trying to play the real estate game myself, and it's
dicey in these times. That's for sure.
yeah, that's true. So we got a couple of people with us today. We've also got friend's brother, Audrey. So I'll give you a chance real quick if you want to introduce yourself.
All right. Hey, everybody. Name's Audrey. Pretty similar childhood to friends, but we kind of split paths, and I'm currently a D3 Minnesota. When it comes to learning about business, we both kind of got early. You don't get a lot of that in dental school. And friend and I took separate ways. So he's been hitting the podcast a lot. I went out and decided to start my own and just see how it went. So I currently own and operate a family-run parking lot striping business in the metro area. And so when I'm not in school, I am walking parking lots, putting paint down for people to park in. As far as free time, I don't have a whole lot of that right now, but I do like, getting out on the lake and doing a little bit of skiing and whatnot when I get a few minutes. But it's been a fun journey. And then whenever I need to learn something new, I ask him to point me to the right place.
Yeah, he's being humble. It's a wildly successful striping business. So it helps you cut a check for dental school every year, don't it?
There you go.
Yeah. So I started in 2018, just about broke even that year. And then things started taking off. So it was kind of an interesting take on business because, when you come from knowing nothing about it, you think that certain things are going to be pretty straightforward. But then you realize you've got to manage your overhead, your fixed, your variable expenses, negotiate contracts, manage people that are either good or not good employees. But long story short, we were able to take it a little over 100,000 the first summer, and I was able to cut checks for the whole year of dental school and pay back a little bit. Also buy a couple trucks and trailers and fun little toys.
I think you have 4 trucks and 3 trailers.
But yeah, it's been good. It's been a lot
he's
of fun.
humble.
Yeah, so you guys are going to be ahead of the curve because you're both pretty heavily involved in the business side of what you're doing, and so you're going to. The context will be a little bit different, but the concept, is going
for
to be
sure. I think the biggest thing is, just using it as a lab experiment, right? John, the best way to learn is to get your hands dirty and start to learn and make some of the smaller mistakes and hopefully learn the bigger ones from people that have gone before, but to just really put to practice what we're learning. So that was at least my biggest focus. And I think Cody was along the same lines.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, it is huge. I know, my first time out there, you can read whatever, learn whatever. And then the first time you have somebody, stripe a parking lot sideways, you're like, all right, what do I got to change so this never happens again?
Yeah.
And implementing systems and all, it's kind of fun to see it come full circle, a few sleepless nights.
Yeah, I think you're going to be way ahead of the curve, man, because you're making some key distinctions right now that are going to benefit you for the long term. And I would tell you, if you're going to focus on anything right now, the number one thing that I see practicing dentists struggle with is not so much doing the dentistry, and it's not so much the methodical mindset of having systems in place. It's more so people. It's leading people, holding people accountable, having effective conversations with the team, clarifying expectations, and that kind of stuff. That's what they struggle with the most. And I think what every business owner out there will learn is you've got this vision of where you want to go and what you want to accomplish, but you can't get there alone. You're going to have people to help you get there.
For sure.
You can inspire them behind what you're trying to accomplish and give them the tools and resources that they need, to support you, then it's going to fall flat. And I think that's why the average dental practice in the United States right now generates $728,000 in collections. Everybody's trying to get to that $1 million mark, but it seems to be so hard to do. And the average dental practice drives about 27% to the bottom line when they should be driving north of 40. So that seems to be the number one challenge. So I want to make a distinction real quick that I think there's a misconception out there for a lot of people that, dentists have this paved path to success and, they, have all this money and all this kind of stuff, and they don't know what it's like to work hard. I'm glad and grateful to have you guys on here and sharing, what you're doing now to pay for dental school. because the vast majority of the folks that I work with, I don't know any of my clients that had a paved path to success. They worked hard through dental school. I've got one client who worked for many years as a hygienist to pay her way through dental school. I've had, clients that waited tables and cleaned stalls, and, so, I mean, there's no shortage of work ethic, to go through something like that. Not to mention do that while you're going through dental school, I think adds to the complexity of the situation. So my hat's off to both of you, gentlemen. And then I want to introduce Mr. Jody Head, who's a Patterson Dental Territory Manager, a good colleague, friend of mine up out of the Louisville, Kentucky branch. Jody, anything you want to share with everybody before we jump into this thing?
Not really. Appreciate you guys. I'm interested to see what, as students, what you guys are looking for as you get ready to venture out and hopefully start your own.
Sure.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons why I wanted to put this together. And a friend and I got to talking about this. Is obviously there's DSOs corporate dentistry comprises about 20% of the market right now, and private's about the other. But the corporate sector is growing very, very quickly, and it's becoming challenging for the private practices who are attempting to position themselves for associates, but they can't. They're not. The packages that they put together aren't quite as attractive, to associate dentists. And I think it's because there's a disconnect. They don't know what you want, right? And I think that evolves over time. But I think the better they understand what you guys want, because based on the data that we collected, it's the overwhelming majority of dental associates want to go into private practice, not corporate. We're going to go through the data and show you where this information is coming from, but the overwhelming majority of dental associates want to go into private practice. And it was the stuff that I found was pretty interesting. I was surprised by some of it. And so this is a space that I'm very involved in. And for some of this information to surprise me, I was like, wow, man, there's a lot of people doing it wrong. So I think the more they understand what you guys are looking for, the easier they're going to be able to create packages, compensation packages, and all these kinds of things that are very appealing, and hopefully let both sides of the equation get what they want. So a win-win solution for both the private practice and the associate. Okay, great. So I'm going to switch gears here really quick, and I'm going to pull up this PowerPoint that got our information in it, and then we'll start going through and discussing some of these details.
Awesome. John, while you're doing that, I'm going to send you a short document that I pulled from a book I read, basically dictating financial projections on the basic average dentist. Because I think you made a really important distinction. I think most dentists these days understand it and know it, but dental school now is very different from when they went to school if they've been graduated 10, 15 years. The amount of debt we graduate with, if you do the numbers on a standard average, what a dentist collects and the amount we graduate with in debt, it's a very bleak future if someone doesn't really plan ahead, for lack of a better way to say that. So I had a couple of resources for that I thought would be great to share with some of your contacts.
Sure. Yeah. Do you want to go ahead and plug that in now, or do you want to find a spot?
I'm shooting it to you. I mean, it's for your use, and I cited everything I pulled, and I just sent it to you in an email. So however you want to use it, take and run with it. But it's just basically a very rudimentary calculation on student loans, average debt of the current dental student, average projected salary for the students coming out, and then, just breaking out a basic budget and showing you basically only have, after all your expenses, a play budget of $542 a month, so in order to have more going on, you really need to plan and either learn how to make more or mitigate your loans, et cetera. Don't be taken out and living like a dentist while you're in school. It's hard enough as is.
Yeah. So let me hash this out real quick, because I think this is going to be really important, because that's a key number to know. A lot of your practicing dentists, a couple of things. A, they don't know when the right time to bring on an associate is. They don't know when they can afford associate, when they can't. And a lot of them will bring an associate on too early. And I started thinking about this as I was going through the data. But because you guys have talked to other young associates who are already out there and practicing dentistry, and they're providing you feedback about their experience. and some of the things that I read, and we looked at some of the fears, what you guys fear when you get out of dental school,
Yeah.
is consistent with what I see. And so a lot of dentists, they either don't know when to bring the associate on, or they bring the associate on too soon and the associate's not busy, and so they're not able to generate the income that they need to meet ends meet, right?
For sure.
And so it says here, okay, so the average income for a dentist has gone up since the last time I saw it. The last time I looked at it was about 128,000 a year.
So just
will blow a lot of people's minds.
Just to,
well, and so
is this an average first-year dentist or an average like career dentist?
yeah, so let me cite my sources really quick. So this all comes from Pillars of Dental Success book written by Mark Costas, who has he was one of the founders for the DSSN network. It's a book. I just want everyone to know that, none of these numbers, nothing I say is ever coming from a dental student knowledge base. Like I don't feel like I'm credible enough to give you good information. And so if there's any questions with anything I say, I'll point you straight to the sources. It's not me saying these are, these data points come from books, which are then sourced to, I think these come from the ADA, I think it's the ADA website for this book was published 2019, I want to say is the most current edition. So all to say, these aren't my numbers. I can point you right to where I found these.
Sure. Yeah. So this is some good stuff here. So average, and this is just your average dentist across the board. So this is,
I'm guessing, yeah, these are just pulled nationally.
Yeah. Cause the last average I saw was 128,000. And
Okay.
so that was a few years ago. So now it's 152. So that's an accurate number. And so after taxes, so that's $152,000 a year, which that number alone, I think would blow a lot of people's minds. A lot of people think, oh, dentists are,
they'd be very happy with that.
Loaded. They make millions of dollars a year, all this kind of stuff. So average income is $152,000 a year on a 200-day work year. That would be approximately $750 a day. Considering take taxes out of the equation, now you're left with $9,290
a month.
Take a mortgage payment for roughly a $300,000 house out of the equation,
because we're dentists.
That's about $1,610. Student loans at $200,000. That's
based on the standard 10-year payment program.
Yeah. And keep in mind, these are dentists this is your average dentist. So this is a guy that's average 30-year-old dentist, first practice, and 55-year-old dentist that's been doing crown and bridge for 20 years. That's very proficient and efficient, right? Maybe even throwing some implants in there or something like that.
Yeah.
Average income 152. So so take out the 1376 for student loans, 885 for card payments, living expenses.
That's a month, $3,500 a month.
$3,500 a month, 10% retirement, and then total expenses come out to $87.47, which nets your average dentist about $542 a month.
Yeah, that's no vacation budget. That's not there's no safety fund in there. There's no other retirements or no saving for a house in that. And the way I like to look at that number, John, 152,000, is I like to look at that. And again, I'm not bashing corporate. For certain people, that's a great option. Mm-hmm. But what I am saying is as you well know, there's a lot of ways to mitigate and save money by owning a business. And so I look at that 152 as, okay, if you're just going to check in, check out, and make a standard salary, the numbers aren't looking great. So not that we shouldn't go into dentistry. There's a great opportunity cost, but we really need to plan ahead to mitigate this, especially for students. A lot of us are looking at these numbers going, okay, how are we going to do it?
Yeah. I did an event earlier this week called Common Sense Strategies to Compete with Corporate.
Okay.
And one of the things that we talked about is, years ago, it was all private practice, right? And it was 4-day work weeks. It was 7 to 8 hours a day. I was only doing crown and bridge. I was taking 6 to 8 weeks of vacation a year. It was very, casual. The business model was, and then corporate, there were some private equity investors that looked at the dental industry and said, man, this checks a lot of boxes. I've got guaranteed demand. You know what I mean? People have to go to the dentist. It's a profitable business model. I can put, you know, from in a general practice, 40+% to the bottom line, and a specialty practice with specialty procedures, I can get closer to 60. So it's a very profitable business model. There's virtually no barriers to entry. Anybody with a dental license can open a dental practice, or I can, you know, structure a DSO and hire dentists and buy dental practices. So there's no barriers to entry. So it checks all the boxes. And so then private equity comes in and they say, wow, there's a lot of opportunity here, because I'm sure people want appointments at 7, 8 o'clock at night or 6, 7 in the morning. I'm sure they want advanced technology. I'm sure they want insurance participation. Everybody used to be fee for service, right? And I'm sure people want Friday and Saturday appointments. So then corporate really exploited a lot of the weaknesses, I think, that private practices had. And then private practices had to turn around and say, holy cow, we're losing market share. What can we do? And then they started to adopt more technology and start marketing where used to nobody marketed. There was no advertising. And now they had to start doing that and worrying about SEO.
Search engine optimization, right?
Yeah.
Pay-per-click, getting where you want to get on Google.
Yeah.
See, these are things dental students have no idea about. They don't know what SEO means. I only learned about that about 6 months ago.
Yeah. And so they really had to start paying attention to a lot of that kind of stuff. And then they, you know, obviously looked for, you know, business people that specialized in the business of dentistry like myself, and, you know, started, you know, making some changes. And then they started kind of taking the market back a little bit. So, but again, the market's evolving, new technology comes out and all this kind of stuff. And so the associate piece of the puzzle is just a whole nother, you know, slice of the pie that we've also got to be focused on. Cause I think corporate's doing a much better job at putting lucrative packages together that gives you guys the security that you need coming out of school. So as we go through this, what I can say is that in my experience, I think corporate has done a better job at identifying what associates want and creating packages that appeal to them. And that's why they tend to create, that's why they tend to, you know, get more associates coming out of school.
Well, and I think they've done a really good job at creating a presence in dental schools. You know, our ASDA, everything our ASDA does now is with Aspen. And last I checked, ASDA and Aspen were two very different things. So, you know, I mean, they're there. They're very present. We have lunch and learns all the time sponsored by this corporate or that corporate. We don't see a whole lot of dentists coming in.
Right.
So,
John, can I interject on that? That's a great point. We've actually been sort of kicked out as dealers, whether it's Patterson, Henry Schein. They are really catering, and I don't want to get too deep into the politics of this, but they're really catering to the DSOs, the RDSOs, because they're contributing a lot of money to the University of Kentucky, University of Louisville, and they are not sending anyone. We have trouble getting in contact with dental students. I know Kevin Parker has done a good job with you, friend, but it's we have real limited access. We can't even hardly do a lunch and learn anymore.
Yeah, the big thing, you know, up in Minnesota too, you know, knowledge is power. And so we've got these DSOs, these corporate places, and they own the school, they own what dental students hear. So, you know, in my 3 years there, we've had half a class on some sort of business, but we have DSOs coming in 3 times a week giving us free pizza. And, you know, they peddle themselves, but the big message they peddle is you can never own a practice, you can never run a business. Let's tell you why it's way too hard. And so, you know, just like you mentioned earlier with that fear thing, what did dentists fear coming out of school? They peddle this fear that, like, it's not safe. You can't be a dentist. You can't run a practice. You're going to, you know, it's that, you know, playing on the fears. And so a lot of dentists or dental students, what they do is they do a little risk benefit analysis, and they say, I'm going to settle for the safety of being able to pay my bills at, you know, $140 a year, but never be able to achieve because they've been peddled this story that, you know, it's attainable.
Yeah.
And
I think that's a real challenge, man, because I mean, think about why you become a practice owner to begin with. You know, the average rate of growth of the average general dentistry practice in the United States is 2 to 4%. You can get 2 to 4% in your IRA. Why are you dealing with the headache? Why are you working 12, 14 hours a day? You know, why don't you just take the money that you're putting in your practice and put it in your IRA and go do something else for a living? That's going to generate you more income. The whole reason you're a business owner is so that you can get a higher return. right?
Mhm.
You get 25, 30, 35, 40% return on your money year over year. That's what private equity knows, and that's what private equity is leveraging. But they got to
Yeah.
have money turning the handpiece.
Yeah. I've seen some recent that it's almost a guaranteed return in private equity for dentistry, that 14 to 16% minimum.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yep.
but
And not, again, I don't think corporate's the enemy. I think corporate.
no, we have so much to learn from them.
Yeah. Yeah. I think they play an important role in the market. You know, when the guys that bought my gym here in Tullahoma, is the day that they like bought the gym and transitioned ownership, Planet Fitness opened up down the road. And I went to Trey and I said, man, you know, how are y'all doing with Planet Fitness opening? And he says, man, Planet Fitness does us a favor. And I was like, what do you mean? And he says, Planet Fitness gets people off the couch with that $9.99 a month special, right? And he said, then when they go in there and they start seeing results, then they want to come to a real gym. And so then they call us. So he says, we don't have to market. You know, they create customers for us, and then they come over to us. And I got to thinking, I was like, does that apply in dentistry? Well, Aspen has the $99 a month, $99 new patient special. And then the patient gets off the couch and goes into Aspen Dental, and then they get a $10,000 treatment plan. There's no bedside manner. There's no rapport. There's no trust in relationship. Customer service falls flat. And then they take that treatment plan and they go to a private practice where they develop trust and rapport. And then they just created a patient for you, and you spent no money on marketing. So I think corporate's valuable in that sense. And I also think for most private practices, and we'll get into this in some detail, for most private practices, associates right out of school, for most associates right out of school are not quite productive enough to make it lucrative for the private practice owner. And so they want you to go to corporate for a while and get your hands speed up and then come over to where now I can make some money on you. Right. And so I think what private practices need to do is they need to learn that bringing an associate in, don't wait until you're 67. Right. You need to bring an associate in when you're 45, when you're 48. It's an investment that you're making. Right.
Yeah.
So you bring the associate in, they may not make you a lot of money in the first 3 to 5 years. You know what I mean? But you're providing them the mentorship. You're making them a better clinician. You're making them a better business owner. I mean, that's the security in your future. And you see a lot of private practices just burn through associates every 2 or 3 years. They've got a new associate in there, you know? So I think it's very important that I want to take this data and I'm going to use this to create another event that's tailored to dentists with this information and helping them put together a program that is much more attractive for you guys. So, so good. So let's go ahead and jump into this thing. We'll go to our first slide here. And this was how many years in school? So this is your audience, basically. These are the people that we're polling. And so we've got 13.9 are D1s, roughly 31% D2s, another 33% D3s. We've got 20% D4s. And then we've got a small percentage here are postgraduate. So a pretty good mix of all the students coming through dental school. It's just about equal in all categories except for post-dental school. So that's your audience that we're collecting this information from. How much do you expect? And these are just questions. Fran put together a Google survey and sent this out to everybody. And so these are the responses that we're showing you. So how much do you expect to make as an associate starting out? And it looks like, I think the expectations are probably going to, just based on what I see, I think the market's going to fail to meet their expectations for the most part, because it looks like the majority, and I'm assuming, Fran, and correct me if I'm wrong, if this were to be a bell curve, then this would kind of be the peak of the curve here. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, this graph is a little deceiving. The only reason I say that is for some reason it threw in, I did two questions and it kind of combined them. So in this, you've got some people want a flat amount. You know, a lot in this are saying, hey, I think the bell curve, like you're saying, is going to fall right around 130 to 145 is what people really want to make. their first year out. But that far right of the bar after 200, where it just kind of gets a little confusing there, what that's showing is that those people they preferred a percent of production. So a lot of them were like, hey, look, I either want my minimum 500 or 600 a day. But as soon as I start making more than that on a set percentage of production, I would prefer to be paid on my production. So that was really cool to me to see. And I appreciated that people, I guess, they're focused on trying to ramp up their hand skills. Like you said, we're going to be slow. I think dentists, you have to pay some to gain the return. And so I think students understand that they want to be guaranteed X amount a day so that they can pay their loans, but then they're really focused on growing their hand skills. They want a percentage of their production or collection.
Yeah.
So
I think a lot of dentists, man, and I would have to put pen to paper and do some math here, but I think a lot of practice owners are tripping over dollars to save pennies.
Yeah, that could be true.
Yeah, based on what I'm seeing, you guys are wanting, help and help with student loans and health insurance and base and then a percentage. Based on the things that you're wanting, it's going to cost you maybe a little bit more in the first, early on, but what that associate's going to make you when, they're 10 years into practice and they're an associate in your practice, what they're going to make you in income will far outweigh what it cost you early in their career. Like compared, like if you spent, $50,000 in the first 3 to 5 years on that associate, then in the second, 5 to 10 years, you're going to get 100, 200, 300% return on that money. I don't think they look at it like that. I think they look at it like, you cost me 50 grand.
Yeah.
So there needs to be a paradigm shift there. I think there needs to be, maybe I need to do that. Somebody needs to do that, but I think it's important to put that information together to show them what that associate makes them later in their career, what it costs them on the front end, so they can actually see the return on investment.
Yeah. One thing I want to add, and we don't need to talk about it now, but we definitely need to cover it at some point is, okay, this is awesome. And I've heard this from several dentists I've talked to. I'm actually under negotiations currently with a dentist who is specifically, voice his concern is, I'm down to sink a lot of money into an associate. I'm down to sink, but why and how do I keep them from leaving? That's my biggest fear. I sink all this time in, I sink all this money in. We need to create a structure, a contractual form that both incentivizes both parties to stay and invest. Because the last thing a dentist wants for sure is to do what you're saying, and then that associate take all those awesome skills and walk out the door and start up their own or just join someone else's train.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And so there are some things there that we do, and I'll share those with you.
Awesome.
We call it lock the associate in. That sounds bad, but it's really to incentivize the associate to stay. Right.
Would love to hear about those.
Because there is definitely if we were to do this same kind of study, the same kind of survey for practicing dentists and get their feedback, maybe we need to do that. What their fears are. With bringing associates in, I can guarantee you that one is at the top of the list.
Yeah.
If I invest all this money in this associate in the first 3 to 5 years and they leave me, I'm out all that money. I got to do it all over again, because in my business, I do the same thing. I recruit coaches, and then I'll strategically place a coach somewhere in our territory to mitigate my travel. And I invest a lot of money in that associate coach. And then if I've invested all that money in that associate coach and they leave and they start up a dental consulting business in that market, now they're in direct competition with me.
Yep.
And I taught them how to do it. Right.
Yep.
I certainly get it. So it looks like the vast majority, we see levels anywhere from, looks like 110 to 120 all the way up to over 200. And the vast majority, it looks like, are shooting for or expect somewhere in the ballpark of $130,000 to $150,000, somewhere in there. And obviously, if they've got a base pay in place, like a 500 per diem or 600 per diem, something like that, then once they hit that mark, they would want a percentage on top of that. And to replace that. So it's I want security in case I'm not that productive. I want the security to know that I'll at least make this amount. And then as I get better and I'm able to do more than that, I want the ability to do more than that, which very reasonable. I would tell you on percentage of production, I don't normally see a percentage of production. What's much more, or if it's production, it's net production, not gross, because you got insurance adjustments in there.
Okay.
Obviously, the practice can't pay you on production because that's fairy dust. It doesn't exist, right? It's collections. So I'll typically see something along the lines of 30 to 35% of collections. And then occasionally we'll see there a benefit that a lot of practices provide the associate is that I cover all of the lab bill, right? I cover your lab too. And then the alternative to that is I'll pay you 30% of collections and less 30% of your lab. So I'll pay you 30% of your collections and you're going to pay 30% of your lab and I'm going to pay the other 70% of your lab. So that's pretty common. So that gives us a good idea of what we're looking at in terms of income expectations. And I would probably say if the average dentist is making 158, I would probably say somewhere in the ballpark of 90 to 110 is going to be much more realistic in the first 1 to 2 years. You know, associate gets out.
Well, I think they'll be we'll get to it. I think they'd be down with that. There's a lot of other ways to get paid that aren't numerical, right? And investment and CE, et cetera.
Yep, absolutely. So this is the one graph that I was referring to. Do you prefer private? And you can see that the overwhelming majority of the people that responded to this survey is private practice. You know, and I would argue that the people that are in this category here that prefer corporate are either people that have zero interest in business ownership. You know, that fear message has resonated with them, or perhaps the other, you know, feedback that they're getting from people that haven't had positive experiences with private practice. I think that's probably what has had them lean a little bit more towards the corporate dentistry side. So, but even with that, obviously the overwhelming majority definitely prefers private practice.
Yeah, for sure. Which was relieving to see. I thought it would have been, I still knew it was going to be a majority, but I thought it was going to be a 66-33 kind of thing.
That's what I was expecting. I didn't expect to see that.
It'd be kind of to see a breakdown of that across the years of dental school too. Just because I know when I came to D1s, you know, everybody knew exactly what they were doing with their lives and where they were going to practice and that they were going to make $1 million. And then, you know, that paradigm kind of switches as we get fed this information.
Sure.
And I'm kind of concerned that this graphic might be kind of a
skewed towards the years.
Rubber hits the road. You know, it takes staying power to own something.
Yeah.
And I just, you know, private's nice, but I don't know if that's really in the face of obstacles, which there obviously are.
Yeah, that's a good point. I'm willing to bet if you did this again and we broke it down by D1, D2, D3, I'm willing to bet that ratio changes over those years.
Probably.
Small as you get older and as you get closer to graduation, probably the percentage of people that are looking for corporate gets less and less and less. That's what I would expect to see. That's a good point. Okay. What are you looking for in terms of compensation? Okay. And so we've got, let's see here. We've got guaranteed base pay, 8.3%. Want a guaranteed base pay. So that would be like a $500 per diem, $600 per diem, something like that. A sign-on bonus. And so I know that that's something that's very common with corporate and not so common with private practice. And so a lot of private practice owners are probably like, well, do I need to offer something like a sign-on bonus? You could, but it doesn't appear as though that's a big ticket item.
Yeah, it surprised me, you know?
Yeah.
And I could have, sorry, John, I could have done this wrong. I would love to do this again here. You know, let's follow up in 6 months and I'll, you know, I learned a lot by creating this. I think I need to create better options of, okay, you know, pick between these and select them to be your 2 favorite of these options, you know, so that people could have selected sign-on bonus and guaranteed base pay or sign-on bonus and percent of production so that we could really see a more specific preference.
Yeah. Yeah. And some of and I'll clarify on these, but some on that survey, you got some of them didn't come through with a graphical representation. It was just the data. And so I went in and counted the responses,
Okay.
plugged the responses into Excel, and created the chart from there. Okay.
Okay.
So
Sweet.
you'll know which ones those are because they don't say 36 responses up here. Okay.
Gotcha.
And then let's see here, 75%. So that's obviously the overwhelming majority. Base pay or percentage of production, whichever is higher. So that's very common, right? That's very common in both private practice and in corporate. And so that didn't surprise me. I expected to see that, a pretty big component of it. Only a percentage of production. Nobody picked that one. And so
we know we're going to be slow.
Yeah, they did it such a small percentage. It doesn't even reflect on the chart here. Not sure, but I would expect it to be competitive with corporate. And so that's purple. And so if you had, if you want to get the majority of folks here, if I'm a private practice and I'm trying to put a package in place that gets me the majority of folks, then if I did, I'm going to guarantee you $500 a day without question. You automatically get that. If the percentage of your production or collection, whichever one, is greater than $500, then I'm going to pay you that. And I'm going to make sure that the percentage that I offer you and the base pay that I offer you is consistent with any offers that are in my market from corporate. And I'm going to offer you perhaps maybe a relocation stipend or some kind of a, sign-on bonus. You're going to get 99% of the people out there. You're going to be giving them exactly what they want. Right. So I think that's good. Let's see here. Okay, this is one of the ones that I had to decipher a little bit.
Yeah.
It's a really interesting one too. What benefits are most attractive to you? And so it was really across the board. You can see the three biggest ones there are health insurance, mentorship, which was very, very popular. There's a couple of different graphs here that we did that mentorship popped up over and over and over again. So I got the impression reading through this thing that the vast majority of folks, that's really the biggest benefit that you see going into private practice is you've got a qualified dental business professional. Hopefully he owns and operates a successful dental practice. He's good at leading a team. He's got a solid team in place, and he's a good clinician, and I can learn from him. That's like the number one benefit, right, of going into private practice. And what I saw based on looking at the data is the vast majority of people would be willing to take less income and have less security if that was available, is what I saw. But what is the quality of the mentor? But was the big question. So 18, go ahead.
Yeah, the mentorship, I think, when I look at this, I know corporate isn't the enemy, but they're kind of the competition. And when we want to, minimize their grip on and maximize, I think that's a huge weakness. And if you can identify their weaknesses and advertise that, that's one place they come up short. I think one thing that is frightening for dental students is a dentist or even corporates, they'll say, oh, great opportunities for mentorship, but it's left there. It might be nice if that could be quantified so that you can sit down and, because when I'm looking corporate versus this and I say, oh, they both say mentorship, but if you can say, the dentist is offering to set aside, 5 hours a week extra to do this, or have open gaps in your schedule where you overlap patients so you can come sit in on implants, to something very identifiable and quantifiable.
Yeah, that would
grab. Because when I look at things, this is, maybe my brain works different than most, but I kind of see these advertisements and levels. So this compensation thing, a lot of places, people are willing to work for less and they're happier if they can get the right environment and the right other things. And as dentists coming out really inadequate, they've taught us to do fillings and single unit crowns, maybe a bridge or two. And if you can say, hey, I've got this dentist that's willing to stand behind me and believe in me, it's way different than just saying, hey, we're offering you 200,000 plus a bonus,
right?
And just, it's kind of one of those, like, allows a fresh dentist coming out to sleep at night, that it's all going to be okay. I've got somebody with 35 years of experience running.
It's not going anywhere.
Standing behind me, teaching me everything he knows.
Yeah. Yeah. I think this kind of goes back to what we mentioned earlier. Cause I get this question from doctors that I work with, and, you know, it's my associate asked me if I would be willing to pay for his implant continuum or help him pay for it, or help him pay for his spear, you know, courses.
Yeah.
And my answer is always the same. It makes total sense to do that, because the more comprehensive your associate, the more proficient they are, the more efficient they are, the more money they're going to generate for your business. You know, so plus the sooner they're going to be in a position to potentially buy into the practice because they're more productive now. There's your real security. You know, so again, when it comes to that stuff, I think a lot of people are tripping over dollars to save pennies. I may have some of my doctors get on to me for saying that. You know, it's a benefit, and you've also got to look at that benefit versus what you pay them. You know, because if you're paying them 40% of collections, then you might have dissolved, you know, the cash flow that would be available to pay that. So it's you know, what's more important to them? Do you want a higher percentage? Do you want a more per diem, or do you want me to help with this, you know, you know, so you got to kind of look at that. And I think that's where you guys have an opportunity to kind of negate. The more familiar you are with what the associateship agreement can look like and what your options are, the better negotiators you're going to be, you know, when you get the package for yourself. So mentorship, so 20%, you know, their highest, the benefit that's most attractive to them is quality mentorship. And I say quality mentorship because in a couple of the next graphs that we look at, was a really important one. 18% health insurance, so that's understandable, and then 24% paid CE. So I thought that was a really good one. So that's what we were just talking about. And then it looks like the next biggest one was other. Oh, and other. What falls into the other category? That was things like flexible schedule. So I want some flexibility with my schedule. I don't want the owner dentist to just pass off all the fillings to me. I want them to work with me on bigger cases. I want to be involved with them in study clubs. I want them to, you know, do case studies with me. It was a lot of those kinds of things. That the individual responses on those were very low, but there were a lot of them, which is why I took them and combined them and put them in that other category. But I think it's important to know, you know, what the options are.
That comes back around again to almost what I see as like a quality of mentorship. If you can quantify that and say, hey, every third implant that comes through the door, I'm either going to put it on you or you're going to sit down, we're going to do it together, and you will split the production. That's something to an associate. It's like, oh, I don't need to go to Arizona to a class if I'm going to get 37 implants in my first 6 months. Right. And it's also, it kind of shows this message that the dentist actually invested in you. He's not just looking at you as a producer, even if that is a byproduct of a good associate dentist relation.
Yeah, you might not, and I think this is appropriate. Like we have coaches that aren't equity partners of ours in our business, but they are our partners, and we treat them as our partners because they are our partners. And I think that the private dentist view you guys the same way. So you may not have equity in the practice yet, but you're still a partner in this thing, right? And so I think that's important. And then a little bit lower, the lesser important variables in terms of benefits you can see are pay was less important to folks than say paid CE or health insurance. And then obviously, you know, if I paid you more so that you could afford the health insurance and the CE, you know, then that would kind of wash that out too. And then ownership opportunities. I was pleased to see that. Ownership opportunities in 401k. So pay and 401k were equal. 7% said that the biggest benefit that they were looking for was to have the opportunity to buy in, to gain equity, which I was pleased to see that.
And Friend has some experience. It was on one of the podcasts we listened to. It was a different type of associateship where it was like an associate to own, where part of your money was set aside to buy. Frank could probably explain more of it. And it was actually shown to have much higher success rate associateship.
Called deferred tax.
Yeah, this one, probably the exact same thing. Brady Frank wrote a book called Transition Time, but he talks about it. He calls it the trial partnership versus associateship. But yeah.
It's called we call it deferred comp. And basically what it is if I've got a practice and Audrey, I'm going to hire you to come in as my associate. I'm going to pay you, let's say 32% of your collections, but I'm going to take another 2% and I'm going to put it in this account over here. Okay. And that account over there is for you. And basically it's just going to accrue equity. Now there's not a real bank account over here with cash in it, right? That's not what's really happening. I'm keeping the 2%. I'm keeping your 2% and I'm keeping it as equity in the practice to make investments. But this imaginary account is sitting over here so that, in 5 years from now, let's say that if you leave me before that 5 years is up, you don't get any of that money, right? That money stays with me. But if you stick with me for 5 years, then I'm going to let you use that account to buy into my practice. So if that account accrues to $50,000, then essentially what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a $50,000 discount on the purchase price when we get the evaluation done.
So, John, is it around 2%? And just again, tell me, I'm very happy to be wrong and be corrected, but that seems low if, let's say it's 5 years for an associate to build up a practice.
Yeah.
That seems like a really low compensation.
That 2% is an imaginary number. It doesn't exist.
Okay.
I'm going to decide that account's going to be worth $100,000 or $50,000.
I gotcha.
So
it's kind of work together as a partnership of like, okay, this is, if you work for 5 years, let's say it builds up to 250,000, you're buying half of my practice at 500. Right. You're basically that way you're not buying your sweat equity back.
Right. And so, yeah, exactly. So you're getting sweat equity. Okay. And that's another negotiating factor for you guys. So if you're becoming my associate and I tell you that this account's going to be worth $50,000, then that's a negotiating variable. What can we do to make that account worth $100,000?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so here's a question for you from what I've been really struggling with this, because I'm coming up. Audrey and I both are coming up on this way faster than we'd like to, or maybe we'd like to. I don't know. I've seen these and it seems awesome, and I'm 100% on board with it. That's what I want to do. But from both parties, the student, the soon-to-be dentist and the dentist, when does this contract when does it start? Does it start the day you walk into that office? Is it like, okay, we got a 90-day grace period? When does this student or this, new dentist and this seasoned doc realize, okay, this is going to be a good fit where we want to start signing this contractual agreement? I want it done before I start. Yeah, but that doesn't seem fair.
Yeah, I typically recommend most of my clients do like a 12 to 24 month initial agreement, right? Because I need to know if I like you or not. I need to know if this thing's going to work long term or not. I don't want to lock myself into a 5-year agreement.
Absolutely.
Unless perhaps this practice is in an area where I can't find an associate, and I've got to have somebody. Let's say it's my second location, and I can't be over there all the time. It's an hour from my primary location. Right. I've got to get somebody. I've got to lock somebody in there. So that's going to change how the variables of this thing a little bit. But I typically recommend a 12 to 24 month, initial associateship. And then at that point, then we talk about what the future is going to look like. Right. And again, there are certain circumstances and variables. If the doctor's health is declining, there are some variables in there that a little bit. But the bottom line is you don't want to be stuck with somebody you don't like, and I don't want to be stuck with somebody I don't like. So
for sure.
If we don't figure that out in our initial interactions and conversations leading up to the associate agreement, then I would have some kind of a, like you said, grace period, so to speak. But essentially, the agreement would start on whatever the effective date of the associateship agreement is. So
gotcha. You kind of prorate it.
Yeah. Can I interject? So I've been involved in a lot of these, and it's kind of a courting period. You're courting them, they're courting you, so to speak. And when John was talking about setting aside the investment of whatever percentage that is, that looks like to you guys, the nice thing about that is that that's that much less money you have to go and borrow to acquire whatever your percentage that you're acquiring of this practice, whether you want to do a 2 or 5 year plan. And then I think what John's also saying is you can accelerate that. Either one of you guys, hey, I like you, you like me. Let's speed this up. This is working out great. We're both making money. And then there's other things like you may have insurance on each other in case there is a health or a death, and then you're dealing with a spouse. And then what I want to go back to is like, just say, I don't know your all's marital status of either one of you, but say your wife cannot stand this town. You know, that might be a situation where you don't get that money that's put back. You know, that would be a situation. But if another dynamic were to happen, you can negotiate it where that money actually potentially could be yours because you earned it. They just set it back for you. So there's a lot of
extenuating circumstances.
Yes.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Okay. So this was an interesting one. So then we took, what the more important ones were over here. So if we called health insurance, paid CE, pay a 401k, if we call all of those income, those are all forms of income, versus mentorship, which one's more important? And the overwhelming majority here was mentorship. So mentorship
surprises me.
Yeah, it did. It surprised me too.
For how much students talk about money, when it all comes down to it, they're like, well, I'd rather a mentorship than a higher paycheck, at least to start. So it's reassuring.
And to me, I thought it was pretty representative of independence. I was pleased to see it because that's the reason I want a mentor, so that I can get up to speed and become proficient and really productive sooner rather than later, which means I'm generating the income myself rather than being dependent upon the per diem.
Well, and it's just, I love how it's a testament to the humanity of dentists. You know, they're not in this and they never were for the money. And it shows like, hey, look, I want to be good at my job. I want to be able to do these cases. I want to be able to help people. I'm happy to forgo a high dollar, comparatively, that corporate will guarantee me out in order to learn. So
I think
I really like to see that.
A dichotomy against, like, if you check who's more concerned about the money and who's concerned about the CE and the mentorship,
again, the years
might be the one that you want, because the way you advertise, even if you're not the most attractive to everybody, you might be able to just let the fish you don't want slip through the net, because people that are just worried about money versus ones that want to learn, you might end up with that aren't chasing excellence. And so if you could take the best off the top and let the ones that aren't chasing excellence run over to corporate, it might end up being like, if you could tailor that to where even if you had less to choose from, you had a better group.
Yeah. So I think in the grand scheme of things, I think most of I would probably say this is true for all of the guys that I work with, but not only are you guys, your higher priority is finding somebody that's going to be a good mentor on both the clinical side and the business side. But I think once these guys get into their mid 40s, early 50s, they want somebody that they can pass this on to.
Yeah.
Because everybody's got the same philosophical background, but the way they apply it looks different. Everybody's got a unique way.
Yeah.
And share that with somebody so that carries on.
For sure, John. This is my personal focus, and I'm going to actually add this to the next poll. But just to clarify, when I'm looking for a mentor per se, I'm really not looking for a business mentor. I want to go into a practice that is successful business-wise with the overhead, but I'm looking for that in a coach. I'm looking in a dentist, I'm looking at someone who's just a killer super GP that has a very solid, proficient clinical suite. I'm really not that interested. Not that I don't want someone who's good at business, but that's what I'm going to have a coach for. And so whether that practice has a great coach or we have someone like you, we have another, we have several different coaches that you may mesh better with, but my main focus is that clinical side.
Yeah.
So.
Cool, man. All right. Let's go to the next one. This was an interesting one. What's your biggest fear as an associate? And then it was a pretty even, it was about a third each one of these, but financial security was a big one. And that was not making enough, not generating enough. And the responses looked different. So based on how they responded, that's how I determined whether they were talking about financial security. Like if they said, I don't know if I'm going to be able to make my student loan payment or be able to cover my mortgage payment or be able to provide for my family. Those all fall under financial security, right? Not being productive. And so financial security was the biggest one. Not being good enough was the secondary one. In other words, if I'm not fast enough to keep up with the private practice, a lot of people called it failing, fail. I'm not able to keep up with the speed that the practice needs, or I'm the weakest link, or various responses along those lines. And then the other one, the smallest one, which was 30%, that was everything from, being in an associateship with a owner dentist that I can't stand, right? Being talked down to, not being treated as an equal, but being treated as, an employee, being, dictated to, being encouraged to do unethical things. What else was in there?
The dentist not being prepared or able to take on the associate thinking they were. I remember with several people.
They said very slow. So my schedule's
Yeah.
very slow, or my schedule's not productive. Not being able to do the kinds of procedures that I want to do. Well, there's another big one in there that I'm leaving out. This was the other one. The owner dentist, basically just putting all the unproductive stuff on me. So taking all the productive procedures, all the crown and bridge implants and stuff, just putting all the small fillings and stuff, extractions on me.
Falls back into that quantifying exactly what that mentorship's going to look like.
Yeah. So I do think that out of the gate, I would say the vast majority will probably, encourage you to do more of the smaller procedures, just because you need the hand speed, you need the repetition, right, to get your proficiency and hand speed and stuff up.
Mm-hmm.
And it helps them to be more productive, right? But I do think there definitely needs to be some scenarios built into that schedule where they're working with you on larger procedures too, right?
Yeah.
Because otherwise, if you're not getting crown and bridge, then you're not going to be. You might be really fast at fillings and extractions, but you're going to struggle with crown and bridge because you don't get very many of them. So I think it's just as important that you get repetition with that stuff too.
For sure.
Too. So I think there needs to be a combination.
Of course. Yeah, I think that's huge because there is like the actual you're going to have to do the simple stuff and you're going to have to put in your time and grind. But back to that mentorship thing, I know like emotions aren't like a great thing to run a business on, but if you can take those and use them to your advantage, I don't that common saying, like, people will forget what you said, they'll forget what you did, they'll never forget how you made them feel. And if dentists can do that extra little thing to make an associate feel a certain way, they'll run through a wall for you. Yeah. It's kind of like a high school coach. People love their high school coaches if they had good ones, even if they weren't the greatest at the technique or whatever. And so I think a lot of that saying like, hey, I will take I'll make a professional sacrifice by foregoing income here to coach you and do this sort of thing. Even like foregoing the money side of it, it speaks volumes, and like people take that to heart even if there's really no words said there. And that can be like, that's once again in my mind, like capitalizing on what corporate is very, very weak at. Yeah. And making a standout. And so if financially you can mitigate the fear of producing, and then mentorship, you can advertise that as like, this is where you're gonna become great. I think it could be a huge thing. Yeah. One other thing that I've been through the poll a few times that I didn't see anywhere is mission and vision. I think if there's a bigger emphasis on, this is my vision, this is my mission, but now this is going to be a two-man show, even if there is an owner and an associate, where they can actually feel like they have ownership in the direction.
That's a really cool thought. I like that.
Share, like, for example, I'm Christian, my dentist I'm talking to out in Washington, he's like, this is the numbers are good, all that. But, at the end of the day, like, people, they can make $100 million in a lifetime and, go home and kill themselves at the end of the day. So if you can get them into like, this is why we're doing what we're doing. Yeah. And this is how we do it. And is there something that maybe you want to add into our, we can revise this and hang it on our front wall? Yeah. That, hey, this is not just the owner doctor's view on how things go, but this is, this is your office too now, regardless of whatever the pay or financial structure is.
Yeah, that's very important. We talk about something we do with our clients called the shared vision. That's one of the very first things we do with them. And it's not the doctor writes this statement down and hangs it on the wall, but the team collectively creates this thing. So everybody has a vested interest in it. It's a part of everybody, because at the end of the day, everybody's going to be needed to get there. No one person can get there by themselves. So I think that's an important distinction. And one of the agreements, we call them agreements. And one of the agreements that I find is probably the single most important agreement to have is open, honest, supportive, and non-judgmental communication. In other words, transparency. Because if, let's say that I'm the owner doctor and I am having you do more of the smaller procedures and I'm doing more of the more productive procedures, but you understand that the reason that is necessary is because I'm paying for this $60,000 implant course that you're going to, and I'm paying for your course. And you're going to get the repetition, but it's also a finance game. I've got to be able, if I gave you all this, I can't get enough of it on your schedule, right?
Yeah.
So I do a little bit more of it. I'm more efficient with it, so we can be more productive and hit these targets financially. And that's where the money comes from to pay for some of these benefits that you negotiated for yourself. So I think it's not knowing why is what scares me or upsets me. But if I know why and I understand and I can adopt some level of appreciation for that, then I can see where he's helping me and not hurting.
I think that's clutch. Communication.
Yeah.
All comes back to it.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see here. What are your expectations of going to work in a private practice? And this was where was the So the vast majority, that was the biggest thing that they see, as the benefit, and what their expectation was going to work in private practice was quality mentorship. You're definitely going to get a higher quality mentorship in private practice than you're going to get in corporate. And that's what people want more of, right? That's what people want. So I think that's why collectively, why we see a higher level of interest in going into private practice than corporate. Income similar to corporate is what they would expect or want. Is that at least the financial packages put in place for them in a private practice would be at least comparable to what they would get in a corporate practice. There was a pretty big chunk of people that said low production. So this is where I revert back to the statement that I made earlier on the call about, the private practice not being ready for the associate. And we bring the associate early and the associate starves to death. I bring the associate in, but I keep all the new patients, and I basically tell the associate, sink or swim, go get your own new patients. Right. Or not being the team, not, building my schedule and making my schedule productive. Because you got to keep in mind your treatment acceptance, your enrollment skills, your ability to handle objections, your ability to get dentistry on your schedule is going to be a lot lower than what the average, I think the industry average is like 46% treatment acceptance. As a young associate, fresh out of school, right into practice, you're probably going to be somewhere in the high teens, low 20. Right? So that means the team there's a more of a need to do treatment reactivation, right, to get the stuff that you didn't enroll back on your schedule. Okay, in order to get your schedule, really productive. So knowing that I've got a team the fear, in other words, of not having, that system in place or a team in place that's going to help ensure my schedule's full. And then lastly was buy-in. That's one of the reasons why I would go into, obviously I don't have buy-in opportunities if I go to work for corporate, right? But if I go to work in private practice, then there's more of an opportunity there, more of an expectation there that I'm going to have some ownership opportunities down the road. And I believe the next slide is not, maybe it's the one after that. Yeah, it's the one after that. After what period of time? This is a really good one. After what period of time do we want the ability to buy in? And I was kind of surprised what we saw there. So the next one is location important to you? And I think this is the thing that I think is gonna hurt some folks. because I expected to see this. I actually expected to see
More.
location.
I think it is higher than this graph shows. I really do.
If we took the 52% here and added the 19% in there, then we would get about 71%. And I think that would be pretty comparable.
Yeah, it's a cultural millennial trend, I think.
Yeah, so I think, remember, the more limited you are on location, this is just what I think an associate would need to understand. The more limited you are on geography, the more limited you are on all the options that you're looking for in a practice. Right? But the more you're willing to move around geographically, the more options become available. So a practice that's offering you exactly what you want, let's say $600 per diem, 35% of collections, I'm going to pay all your lab. I'm also going to give you a $10,000 relocation or $15,000, signing bonus. I'm also going to make contributions to your 401k. I'm also going to give you a $50,000, continuing education stipend over your 3-year contract. I'm also going to have this deferred comp program over here, but you're going to have to move to Oklahoma, Tennessee. Right. Right. Well, I don't want to live in Oklahoma, Tennessee. So what you're wanting is out there, but you got to be flexible.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So location seems to be a pretty important variable for a lot of folks. And I think if they can loosen up a little bit on and we see the same thing, like, a lot of business I do a lot of business down in Atlanta, and, that's a pretty common trend down there when we're looking for associates on the more rural skirts of Atlanta. Is everybody wants to be in metro Atlanta, right? Everybody wants to be in Buckhead, but make twice the income in Lilburn, or Monroe or Sewanee than you can make in Buckhead. But everybody wants to be in Buckhead because they're 33 years old and they're young and they're not married, and that's the place to be. But 30 minutes northeast of here, you can make twice the income. So you just gotta 30 minutes, depending on what time of day you're driving down there, because that could become an hour and a half real quick. Okay,
for sure.
A good one. After what period of time do you think most associates would be interested in acquiring a practice? And I like seeing these guys immediately. Those are going to be your high D type personalities, man, that are just ready to. I don't want anybody. I want to do it my way. I would imagine some of these guys are even considering walking out of dental school and going to the bank, getting a loan, and starting a practice. I've seen that. I've seen that a handful of times. So I was glad. I would say
some of these numbers are a little skewed too, because you got to remember a lot of my contacts and my circles I run in are business people too. So
yeah,
I would say not all of these. The trends may be skewed a little bit more towards people that, more people that are focused on business ownership. So
I got you. That makes sense. So I was pleased to see this one. No interest. I prefer to be an associate from 8 to 5 and concentrate on my clinical suite and patient care. I was pleased to see that percentage was so small. And again, it may be a little skewed, but I still would say that that's probably the smallest section of this pie, regardless of who we asked. But I was really pleased to see that, because again, that's one of the reasons why you invest what you do, in a dental education, is so that you can get the return on investment in dental practice ownership that's available to you. And then the vast majority looks like after a year, we're looking at ownership opportunities. I think it would be important from the owner's standpoint to make sure that we have this conversation on the front end, because if I'm telling all the associates that are calling me that there's going to be no ownership opportunity for 3 years, I'm going to lose 56% of the people. I'm going to lose 1 out of 2 associates. So I'm going to go through a lot more before I find one that sticks. Whereas, you got another 36% that aren't interested in ownership until 3 years out of school. And so, that's certainly something to take into consideration. It's putting a package together that appeals to the largest percentage of people is going to help me find an associate sooner rather than later, and help me retain them more long term. So I thought that was
For sure.
What is most important to most associates as they begin their career? And you may have to explain this one to me a little bit, because there's a handful of different options here. A job quickly after starting.
So the way these worked is it was a fill in the blank. And so I didn't want to, because I didn't know, like I said, I run in a business circle. I didn't want to generate options for a multiple choice that limited people's ability to respond.
Right.
So what this is that's all the responses where they tried to throw them into a graph. What it is, those higher bars are basically people said actually word for word the exact same thing. So again, it largely falls into some security and quality mentorship. When you go through them all, it's honestly, I'd say, your pie charts really already speak to it, that it's mainly good mentorship and some security. And just from my experience, I think Audrey hit the nail on the head of just, we need to find a way to quantify and qualify exactly what that mentorship entails and how, not only that of like, hey, look, if you just do 3, if you get a basic implant confidence from your mentorship, that's, right there, and guaranteed X amount of cases right there, that's easily triple what a sign-on bonus could be, So a lot of these people have no idea, in our business class, a professor came in, not a professor, but a practicing dentist, and asked, what do you think the standard cost of a crown is? 2 people in the entire dental school class had even a semblance of an idea of what a crown costs. That no one knows what, okay, you're telling me I get to do 6 implants this month. Okay. Does that mean I get, $1,000? Does that mean I get $5,000? What does that mean? What does production mean? So I think a very simplified of, okay, you're going to make, and that roughly guarantees you probably $20,000, $30,000 extra, from this mentorship. And if you really put your mind to it and you do a rough, projection on what that looks like for the next 5 years, you can make 10 times as much as you thought you could just on basic investments, in your skill suite from a mentor. So yeah, I think Audrey really hit it. If we can really clarify exactly what a dentist has to offer in the terms of mentorship, I think it's a home run hit of like, well, no brainer. I don't need to go to corporate. I can do exactly what I want to in a private practice setting. So
good. So you said the probably the 2 biggest out of this portion of the survey here was, I think you said, mentorship and security. So knowing they're going to be able to get their bills paid, they're going to make enough money to survive and thrive.
And that they're going to get better.
Yep, they're going to get better, and also that they've got the mentorship there.
Yep.
Okay, perfect. And then the last question was, anything else you'd like to see private practices offer to help make them more attractive? And this was just basically, I just compiled all these responses into kind of a bullet points here. So study club participation, whether study club membership is, a benefit of the practice pays the $140 a month or whatever it is to be in a study club. And then I would say case studies with the associate. So it's have the associate prepare some cases. And then this is something a lot of these practices can be doing right now while you don't have patient care, is to be doing some Zoom meetings with your associates and doing some case studies with them remotely, looking at cases and looking at, x-rays and stuff. But having a study club, maybe the associate and the owner doctor are in the study club together, and they're sharing cases and working through stuff together. So I think that's good. A profit share opportunity, built into the compensation program, whether that is a 401k contribution or match. One thing I didn't see, here it is down here at the bottom. We'll get there. So profit share program, which I'm a big advocate of. I think that's a very important thing to have in place. And we recommend a profit share program, not just for associates, but for the teams too, and those tend to work very well. Quality mentorship. We spent a lot of time on that one. I would expect to see, I saw this in a couple places, but technology, because more and more dental schools are starting to go digital, right?
Yeah.
There's, and I mean, that's just the direction things are headed, and it will continue on that trend. So if I'm an associate coming out of school, I would want the practice to kind of be on the more advanced, the more cutting edge side of technology, out of date, all that kind of stuff. having a busy schedule. Obviously, I want to know that we've got systems and mechanisms in place to help ensure that my schedule's productive and that I'm going to be able to generate the kind of money that I need. A paid CE program to where I've got, so much is being allocated to a fund that I can use for CE, or you allocate so much per month that I can use for CE. Relocation expenses are like a sign-on bonus, where I get some amount of money up front because I'm going to have to move my family from Louisville to E-Town, or, whatever that looks like. Health insurance, which is a pretty easy one, pretty straightforward. 401k match would be a good one, or, some other kind of financial incentive to where I can make pre-tax contributions to my retirement. Ownership opportunities. And this is basically what this list is, or these are things that you guys are looking for when you get out, right? These are things that would be attractive to you. So if a private practice wanted to put together a compensation package that was going to be as attractive to as many associates as possible, then obviously take into account the percentages, that we just walked through, how many are wanting quality mentorship versus, health insurance versus pay versus security and all those kinds of things. And then this list, and put together a compensation package that, you find is going to, be most attractive. Paid time off, which is, I don't see that one very often. If you're, and this kind of reverts down to the next one, which is employee versus independent contractor. I didn't see that one come up as often as I thought, but there is an argument here that in a lot of cases where, if you look at the IRS's definition of an independent contractor, then there's an argument that, an associate dentist's role in the practice is more consistent with an employee than it is an independent contractor. But at the same time, the IRS would have to show damages if you were paid as a 1099. So the advantage to being an independent contractor versus an employee is you can make pre-tax contributions to your retirement. You've got tax advantages as an independent contractor that you don't have as an employee. So you can write off CE, and you can write off travel and car payment, maybe, depending on what your travel to and from the practice looks like. So there are some tax advantages to being an independent contractor versus an employee. So my personal recommendation is independent contractor. I've found that to be the most advantageous approach for both the practice and the associate. And if you were an independent contractor, there would probably not be a paid time off, because you're being paid on a percentage of what you do. As an employee, I think that might be able to be negotiated in there. So something to take into consideration. Flexible schedule was another one. So, depending on what the operating hours of the practice are, I want a little bit of flexibility. I want a little bit of a, say on how late I stay or how earlier I come in, or some of those kinds of things. And then a really good one that I think could certainly be built in there is some kind of student loan assistance. Can we put some kind of a program in place to where, a percentage of the revenue that I generate or something like that, either I get, a higher percentage of what I do, or you take a percentage of, what I do, and you allocate that to this student loan program to where I'm able to help make sure that my student loans are paid for. I thought that was a pretty good one. So I would look, if I'm a private practitioner, a private practice owner, and I'm looking at how can I put a package together to be as attractive to as many associates as possible and to retain them long term, I would take this list and I would use this list to create what I felt was a really, good quality program or package. And I would start using that in my, preliminary discussions with associates. And then based on their feedback, I would make adjustments and alterations and kind of take it from there and have it evolve and morph into what will ultimately be like the platinum plus package for associate dentists.
For sure. I think we got a good list, at least a good one to start with. Do this survey a few more times over the next year and really hone it in.
Yeah, I would like to. I've got to play with the Google surveys, but I'm gonna do the same thing that you did, and I'm gonna send that out to all, because I've got a lot of practicing dentists in my email database, and so I want to put
sweet
somebody like that and send that out to them. And
For
then
sure.
see what that looks like. And then we'll revisit this one in, I don't know, 3-6 months, somewhere in there. And
Awesome.
maybe fine tune
Um,
a little bit and how the responses that are available so we can kind of, fine tune the data a little bit more.
I'm
Perfect.
just I'm spitballing here, but one of the things that did come up a lot was, associates afraid to join a practice and then having an empty schedule. And through various podcasts and what we've tried to learn, they kind of have these benchmarks that a dentist needs to be producing to show that he's taking on more than his fair share of work, so that way when an associate does come, there's enough work to go around.
Mm-hmm.
And this is on a much larger scale, but if they were able to create some sort of resource that says, like, this dentist is verified by this organization that, like, they can handle 2 dentists worth of work, so that a D4 coming out of school could say, all right, this person's been vetted by whoever checks the productivity, rather than just somebody that's saying this is what the practice is worth, or this is your contract, but they've actually had somebody review that they are able to sustain 2 doctors on a full-time basis.
Yeah. I can share with you the variables that I consider,
Mhm.
I believe it's the right time, just based on my experience. And I've got doctors that are anywhere from, one working out of 1 column with 1 assistant to, working out of 4 rooms with 4 assistants. Right. And so there's kind of a progression to this. So when you're first going, you might be, one column with 1 assistant, right? And then when you can't get major production, Crown and Bridge on your schedule within, I would say 2 to 3 weeks, right? Conservatively, 2 to 3 weeks, then you need a second room with a second assistant, right? And so then I would have 2 rooms with 2 assistants, but I've still got non-productive stuff in those 2 columns, like, extractions or seats or adjustments or tries or deliveries. So then when I get to where I can't get major production on my schedule within 2 to 3 weeks, then I need an overflow room. And now I'm putting all the non-productive stuff in the overflow room, and I'm using my 2 primary theaters of operation for major production.
Mm-hmm.
When I find myself in a position where I can't get major production on my schedule in 2 to 3 weeks, I need my assistants to become expanded duties.
Mm-hmm.
And I've done the math on this thing, and this is what I found to be financially the most efficient, cost-effective approach to adding resources to get to single doctor, 1 column to multiple doctor practice. So if my assistants are expanded duties and I've got, 2 major theaters of operation and an overflow room, and then I find myself in a position where I can't get major production on my schedule, I need an associate. If I don't have an associate at that point, then it's actually costing me money not to have the associate. And I can very easily, because you look at what your associate wants to make, we'll do the math real quick, $150,000, let's say, okay, total package, right? $150,000 divided by 200 work days, that's 750 divided by, let's say, 35%. That means you're producing 2142 a day. That's 2 major procedures.
Mm-hmm.
So that's very easy. So
Yeah.
I can pay you the 150 just based on the dentistry that I'm not getting completed because I'm having to push it too far out in my schedule. You follow what I'm saying? Because once we push it out too far, then our treatment acceptance begins to drop.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's a state management thing. So when people are in state, you've had a conversation with them and you've enrolled the dentistry. Now they're in state to do it and they're ready to do it. But I put it on my schedule 6 weeks from now. Then a lot happens between now and then that now that crown's not so important. So it falls off the schedule.
Mm-hmm.
So that 2 to 3 week mark on the restorative schedule tends to be where the law of diminishing returns is.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So at that 2 to 3 week mark, that's when you can't afford not to have an associate. Granted, the other variables of that equation have already been met. So if I'm an associate and this doctor's trying to hire me, right? And I'm looking at that. I'm going to say, well, can he really afford to have me in here? Now, maybe he doesn't want to work with 2 assistants. Maybe he only wants to work with 1. Okay. Then take those variables out of the equation. And that's fine if he only wants to work with 1. or maybe his piece of real estate doesn't have enough operatories, right? And so those are things I want to take into consideration when I'm looking at, can you afford me? Because he probably doesn't know. He thinks he can, probably doesn't know. So
yeah. Every doctor that's looking for an associate probably thinks they can feed one. But I could be wrong too. You can correct me. But a lot of like associate positions, they aren't necessarily brokered. Like, the doctor draws up a contract, associate gets it, he takes it to his lawyer, checks it over, but nobody really checks to make sure that practice can handle it. Like, do you think there's a place for maybe an organization to come in and say, hey, we've checked this practice, we aren't evaluating, we just know it can support 2 people? Like, and it's one thing to educate me to do it, which is awesome, and like that's something I would chase after myself. But in order to attract 70 to 90% of dental students to go private, maybe that's a resource that a couple hundred dentists could come together to create, to just make it one of those things to help make private a more attractive option, or at least a safer feeling option.
Yeah, I think you're onto something there, because in our initial conversation, that kind of popped into my head, because we were talking about, how Patterson is having a difficult time getting in the dental school because the DSOs are giving them so much money and all this kind of stuff. I know I'm not faulting the dental schools. They need that revenue, right, to provide the services and everything that they do. But is there a need for an organization that represents private practice that collectively can have a comparable amount of money to go to the dental school and say, hey, we got just as much money as the DSOs do. Let us send some people in here, so that we can give our message to the dental students. And maybe perhaps it's that same organization that's going to, provide negotiation services for associates when they're looking at associates contract. Maybe they hook you up with somebody, and that is kind of like your buyer rep. I do a lot of buyer rep coaching for younger doctors that are buying their first practice to help them get practice. Maybe they could provide something along the same lines for guys that need help negotiating their contract with the private practice or the DSO. So I think you're on.
And I'm excited for the next one. John, I got to run. I got these guys inside my truck ready to get back to work.
Yeah, I do too, man. But hey guys, I appreciate you. I appreciate everybody for watching. And if you need any questions, just DM me, or I tagged friend in this on Facebook, so you can DM him. And until next time, y'all guys have a great rest of your day.
Yeah, thanks so much for having us on, John. I learned a ton. Appreciated. And I'm excited for the other side of this, seeing what the dentists are really looking for.
Yep. So I'll be getting that one out there as soon as I can get the information together.
Awesome. All right. Stay safe. We'll talk to you soon.
Yep. Thank you.